Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Paul Gray, the Secretary-Treasurer of the Schooner Association. Peter Thompson is with me, and we'll be doing the actual presentation tonight. I want to thank everybody for joining us for our inaugural Third Thursday webinar series. We're going to be doing these every third Thursday of the month. And the idea is really just to come up with different topics about schooner-related things and present them out to membership and anybody else who may care to join us. It's not restricted to members, so anybody is more than welcome to join us. As I mentioned, Peter will be doing a presentation tonight on the restoration of Blackbird, which is in Alden 309, as well as some very interesting information about the 309 itself. Peter had given this presentation at our annual meeting last year, Peter, I think it was? Yeah, last year. And it was a very fascinating meeting. So when we decided to do this, I reached out to Peter to see if he'd be interested. And he very graciously jumped into the fray. So with that, couple of things. The presentation itself will take about 45 minutes. We'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A. So at that point, we'll unmute everybody because I think everybody is muted at the moment. We'll unmute everybody so that you can talk and ask questions of Peter, and we'll see how that goes. And I think with that, we're all set. And Peter, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I'm going to share my screen, and I just want to verify that the screen is being shared and people can see it. Is that working?
Yep, I got it, Peter.
Okay, so I'm going to assume that we have liftoff. Thank you, Paul, for the introduction. Tonight's talk, as Paul has indicated, will be around the 309 schooners. Part of it's about the restoration of Blackbird, but there's some other topics I want to cover because they're interesting. Let me see. It's not advancing. There we go. It's advancing now. So the topics I want to talk about tonight are varied. Important one is when you're doing a restoration like this, it's all about the help along the way. You can't do a restoration by yourself. You know, when you're doing an owner restoration, you're typically working like myself full-time. So you're only generating one full man-hour of work on the boat every 2 years. Compared to a yard, it might have 5 employees, and they're doing 10 years of man years of work in 2 years. So help along the way is very important. The really interesting topics, I think, are the naval architects of the time, design of the boat. We have a big archive of information on the yachting business in the Depression. We'll talk about that. There's some very interesting stuff there. And then finally, we'll get into the methods, materials, and what I call the madness, which is restoration. But all talk should start with a disclaimer, and here's mine. And this disclaimer comes from Jim Lobdell of Malabar, too, if some of you know him. But he has always said that I'm one of the few people that can talk a dog off a meat truck. I don't know whether that's a compliment or whether it's just what it is, but it's probably pretty important tonight because we have to go through 185 slides. So I want to start also with some acknowledgements to do a project like this. And this is for those who may be inspired to do a restoration project on their own. You need to have a good support team. Clearly, my acknowledgements go to my wife, Sandy, and Tiller Dog, who really were movers in the project, but most importantly, Bobby Pulsch. Bobby Pulsch is no longer with us, but he has built many boats. And he said to me on a visit, Peter, if you're going to complete this project, you have to touch the boat every day. And what that meant was you didn't have to work on it every day, but you at least always had to go sit on it every day and touch it. You may be just having a beer and thinking about work and planning things, but if you don't touch the boat every day, the boat will get away from you. And before you know it, months have gone by and nothing's gotten done. Then also reach out into the community of the yacht designers and builders and find help. Niels Hellenberg, also no longer with us, was the last naval architect of the Alden firm and later Hellenberg Designs. And he would add little tiny little bits of thoughts and ideas, small ideas, which would be large in their implications in terms of improving the project. Joe and Jamie Lowell, we used them on some specific aspects of the project for help, building garbards and cockpits. Frank Luke is a huge problem solver. He did a lot of our fab work, but I could call and talk to Frank and say, I've got this issue, got this problem, and what are your thoughts? And he'd come back the next day with a very simple, elegant solution that would work and save a lot of money and be just what we needed. Matt Sear did a lot of our fab work as well, did great work. Ross Gannon, everyone probably knows Ross. He's just a source of encouragement, a well of ideas and a well of knowledge. And he spent some time here helping us think about how to bend in the big engine leak garbards, but most importantly, just the encouragement of getting the boat done. Have a good surveyor on your project. We had Cap Leonard and Paul Haley. They're important to make sure that what you're doing is correct. Doug Theobalds is our go-to varnish and paint guy. He has worked with us for over 30 years, and it's the paints and the varnishes that help protect the vessel. And then underlying all of that is Alan Dugas at Royal River Boatyard, who's just been a great boatyard, always ready to help with the boat and appreciates and understands what it is to take care of a wooden boat. So let's talk a little bit about the Alden schooners themselves. Golden Hind and Twilight were probably the predecessor boats to the 309 design. Golden Hind had a beautiful lofty staysail rig. Twilight was designed the same year as the 309s, and she also had a very similar lofty rig. Here is the design plan from Aage Neilson for the 309 sail plan. Very similar in stature to the previous sail plans we've just shown. But the amazing thing to me is, I just can't get over this. Aage Neilson was only 21 years old when he drew the plans for the 309. He was an absolutely brilliant naval architect. Aage came to Alden from Denmark. He was a Danish yacht designer. He had put a plan into Rudder magazine in 1925. Alden saw it, and Alden called him up and hired him. Later, when he worked for Sparkman Stevens before the war, after which he started his own firm, like many people did, Alden was so impressed with Aage. He said, basically, even though I was the top dog, I was well aware that Aage's knowledge and experience were far greater than my own. What an accolade from one of our greatest yacht designers. Aage Neilson was clearly way ahead of his time. So if we look at the Aage Neilson sail plan for the 309, he also produced a gaff on gaff. Only 3 boats ultimately were ordered with this sail plan. But it speaks to the question, why are we having multiple sail plans? Well, the 309 design was a unique idea to Alden at the time to produce a large serial schooner, large being large in our time, small in that day, 43 feet on deck, in a serial fashion. What that meant was that they weren't having people coming in and doing a one-off knockout design for a boat, but they offered a design with 2 sail plans with a headsail rigs that included single and double headsail, so really 4 sail plans, and then 3 accommodation plans. And the idea was that a prospective buyer would come in and order a sail plan, an accommodation plan, and then the boat was already halfway built by Gowdy Stevens, because all the 309s were built by Gowdy Stevens by contract, and the boat could be delivered very quickly and very economically. To give an underscore to that, Alden had a very mature firm by that point in time. He had a brokerage business that was very well developed, led by Robinson, John Robinson. He had a marine insurance business, and he had the marine architecture business. Here's a cut sheet from 309F. After the first 5 309s were sold, Alden realized these boats were going to be so popular that he started building them on spec, and I mean speculation. So he was building boats and without owners. And then he put a sales force together to market the Alden brand. And here's one of the documents we have in our archives from that. And they identified that these schooners were really very well established and sailed well to windward, and much better than actually some of the full keel versions of the time. And the slip sheet went on to talk about the attributes of the 309: stiff, church-like stiffness, stable, fast, seaworthy, easy to handle, which I'll vouch for. Just my wife and I is all we need to sail a boat. Can't capsize it. That's a big selling point, but a lot more boat inside. So you can see that the Alden brokerage firm was really well developed, well organized, and they were selling the Alden brand. And here's the construction plan that Aage drew. Again, age 21, brilliant guy. And you can see some of the attributes that led to the boat's features. Here we have the beam section highlighted, and you'll see that there's a very sharp turn to the bilge midships and a very shallow ballast keel. And this leads to a very good righting moment where the boat ends up being very stable. It's hard to get the boat to heel over much past the point where the rail is just getting close to the water. Also in the Aage plan, we see that the mainmast is very far forward. It's right behind the centerboard trunk, highlighted in yellow. In contrast, we'll take a look at a later plan. This is Blackbird's. Blackbird was the only custom 309. She did not have a stock interior plan. She did not have the stock sail plan. Her sail plan was done by Carl Wahlberg, and the accommodation plan had to accommodate that. But they were very, very commodious boats for family cruising. That's what they were designed for. Nice cabinetry, 3 big berths in Blackbird in the main salon, plus a hanging berth, which is great for overnight sailing in rough seas for crew. And then we have a large stateroom, galley forward, and head to starboard. So down below, the boat has a lot of room, and they were great family cruising boats and ended up becoming family legends. If we look at the Carl Wahlberg version of the boat, we see now that the mainmast is back a good 18 to 24 inches farther aft than the Aage Neilson sail plan. If we look at the Carl Wahlberg sail plan, which is what Blackbird is, you'll note that the mainsail is really a lot smaller and the foresail much bigger compared to the Neilson plan, where we have a very large mainsail reminiscent of Twilight and earlier vessels, and the Carl Wahlberg plan is shorter and stouter. I think what this was intended to do was to create a vessel that was not controlled as much by that big mainsail, and it is. The big mainsail will drive the boat to wind, and but have more power in a foresail. Both rigs have the same sail area, and here they are in real life. There's Blackbird on the left in 2017, and then there's the Aage Neilson sail plan on 309A, the first 309 owned by Charles Lauder at the time. So let's talk a little about Carl Wahlberg, because he's obviously important in the boat. He was a Swedish